Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is the HPC meeting for February 9th, 2021, and a quorum being present. The meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission shall come to order. The commission operates pursuant to land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from municipal code of the city of Annapolis, chapter 21, section 56. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve sites, structures, and districts of historical, cultural, archaeological, and architectural significance. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in section 21, chapter 21, section 8.06. The HPC operates pursuant to the State of Maryland Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed between or among commissioners outside the public hearing to determine the disposition of any application. Okay, so that's the first item on the agenda tonight. Second item on the agenda is roll call. Bill Williams is here. Say aye. Kim Finch, please say aye. Bobby Collins.
Aye.
Will Scott.
Present.
Tim Leahy, I am the chair. And we have staff. Roberta Lehner is here, Chief of Historic Preservation.
Present.
And John Tower, looks like he might have disappeared again. He is Assistant Chief. We have also representatives from the Office of Law, Joelle Braithwaite and Cheryl Wood.
Hello.
Our recorder is Ms. Tammy Hook, who will make sure I don't forget things, which I always do. So. This commission is authorized. So what we're going to do now, everyone has been to these meetings before, so you'll know the process pretty much. The commission's authorized to take an oath in mass at the beginning of the meeting. It includes applicants, staff, consultants, and any members of the public who seek to enter their comments regarding applications. If you intend to testify this evening, please raise your right hand. And then what I'm going to do is go around and just tap on, I'll ask you to unmute yourselves to say affirm. But do you affirm under penalties of perjury that the testimony given this evening and the statements that you shall make are best to the are true to the best of your knowledge and belief? Please respond by saying I do. So I see Roberta. I do. I'll call on Phil. Anyone else who intends to talk tonight, please unmute yourself and just say I do.
I do.
Chairman, I do, of course. I just don't think that attorneys are usually required to be sworn in. Is that right?
I'm sorry?
I don't believe that attorneys are usually required to be sworn in, or at least I'm not for any other boards or commissions.
Yes, they are.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone from Purple Cherry? I didn't hear an I do from.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. Do you, being sworn in, you're. I do?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is announcements. Roberta or anyone else announcements?
Yes, I just want to announce that at our next meeting, the HPC administrative meeting on February 25th, we will have a presentation by AMRP. And those are the developers for City Dock and the Killman Garage project. That will be a joint presentation with invited attendees of the Planning Commission. So they will be joining us for a joint presentation. There may be other pre-applications, but this would be the first presentation by the developers of those projects.
Yeah, and we're excited about that. I will tell you there is a presentation that is out there if you haven't seen it already. It's worth looking at. And what I have understood is that for the next few months, at least, maybe through the year, the City Dock Planning Committee will be the central point of contact for that project, those projects, the multiple projects. And they'll turn it over to AMRP probably late in the year as the single point of contact. So that kind of came out in prior meetings. Okay.
Tim, may I make an announcement?
Sure, of course.
Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., you may all want to tune in to the Mitchell Gallery to hear a panel discussion about the work of Aubrey Bodine. And I make this announcement to the commission because the photographs are all of Anne Arundel County and some of them of sites, locales in the historic district. And you may find it interesting to see them and to hear the discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed that. All right, other announcements? Okay. Next item on the agenda is D, approval of minutes. We have December 8th and 2020 and January 12th, 2021. Did anyone have any comments? Besides me? I have one comment, Tammy, just in administrative business on the January 12th, that Roberta and I are working on the typos and formatting for the rules of procedure, not guidelines or code. I think it says Tim and Roberta are working on code. We're just doing the final formatting for the rules of procedure before we put them up on the website. So, okay, Tammy?
You said the rule, working on the editing
Of the rules of procedure,
Okay.
as opposed to, I think it says city code, which, no.
Okay,
Code
thank you.
changes, right, under other business, Tammy.
I got it. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes for December 8th, 2020.
I move that we, or so moved.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'll take a motion for the approval of the minutes for January 12th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Okay, good, thanks. Okay, next item on the agenda is violations. Roberta, any violations that you'd like to discuss with us?
Well, in January, we were able to close two violations, one at 214 Prince George and another at 254 King George. And shout out to John Tower for working through that, because we had multiple violations at 214 and that has shaped up very nicely now.
Great.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks. Next item on the agenda is consent docket. And as I said earlier, we don't have anything on the consent docket tonight. All right, we'll move into new business. First on the agenda is 79 Franklin Street. And I'd just like to make kind of an introductory comment that we are going to be dealing with complex, relatively complicated issues this evening. And as a commission, we are required to follow city laws and code and provide a consistent process for all city owners, city property owners. We try to get to yes, as we have always in the past, but I just want to let you know that there are some technicalities that we're going to be dealing with tonight on all three applications. And I just want to let you know that we're going to be, the Office of Law folks are here. And I just want to let you know the staff reports on all three applications had issues. And so we're going to be dealing with some of those tonight. So that being said, we try to do the best we can to get to a yes, but sometimes the city code does not allow us to get there. So just as a way of introduction. So who is here to discuss? I think it's Phil to discuss 79 Franklin.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. For that foreboding set of comments. I'm curious to understand any of the technicalities involved with the staff for this project, which, as the board and chair,
Phil,
aware,
would you mind turning on your camera?
no problem. I don't have a button to do that at the moment, but okay, there we go.
There we go.
And good evening to Chief Lehner and Assistant Chief Tower as well, and all the members of the board. So as I said, I'm not sure what type of technicalities we might be looking at here. Doesn't seem to me that from the staff report there's anything indicated there. The staff report recommends conditional approval with conditions that the applicant is happy to accept.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So the way our rules of procedure work are you are free to make your presentation, and then we will have a discussion about the completeness of the application, and I might as well cut to the discussion is going to revolve around the ability for the HPC to approve an application when zoning exceptions or variances are not complete. So that's the technicality we have in front of us on this application.
Mm-hmm.
And the rules would say, please make your presentation, but then if it is the commissioners that can then discuss whether it's complete or not. And unfortunately, in this particular case, I would be saying that it cannot be complete because of the restriction in code. And I can give you the code quote if you want me to.
Well, sure.
Mr. Chair, before Mr. Dale speak, may
Sure.
I make a comment to clarify what I said earlier?
Mhm.
I apologize. I overlooked that aspect of the application on this matter, and I agree that it is not suitable for the consent docket. So I
Right.
just want to make that clear.
And
we're- thank you.
Tim, real quick, you want to put the exhibits in, and are we
Thank you,
doing site
Tammy.
visits?
There she goes. There you go, Tammy. Thank you. So
Are we doing site visits on these? Because that's another thing we would do.
okay, great. So Phil, what I'd like to say is that we would have the capability of not hearing the application at all. But what I'd like to do, since we've moved forward and there's lots of documentation, I think it's worthwhile that the commission hear the application, including accepting all the exhibits into the record, taking your testimony, opening public testimony, and then, but unfortunately, we will not actually be able to vote on this tonight per the code.
Thank you,
But-
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I'm happy to proceed with our application, and so that we can talk about any of the substantive issues and understand whether the board sees any substantive issues. Of course, we are aware of the board's opinions and requests from the pre-application hearing we had here, and again, are accepting of all of the proposed changes and conditions that have been recommended.
Yeah.
I think we may have different views about the board's ability to approve conditionally an application based on the pending status of an application for a special exception or variance.
Yeah.
And I think the Office of Law being here is helpful for that. What is not helpful is to hearing out this for the first time right now. The application was submitted long enough ago, as were the special exception and variance applications, to have been made aware of this view of the board, to have discussed it with the Office of Law prior to this hearing, and to have come to consensus on the legal requirement for approval or not of those special exceptions and variances before this board can act. I'd also take this time to note that I've been involved with other cases before that have had approval from HPC prior to special exception approval. Now, with that said, I was preparing to make my presentation and bring forward the architect, Peter Miles, who should be in the audience now.
Mhm.
And he'll be making the substantive presentation tonight, and the applicant, Stacy Rice, who is the contract purchaser. So if they could please be brought forward.
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, Phil, and if I was able to communicate with you outside of a meeting, I would have.
Yeah, I think in response to that, Mr. Chairman, you know, this is not an issue. Procedural questions are not an issue that are unique to HPC. And ordinarily, what would happen is if the board had this kind of view, or if the chief had this view or was aware of it, that the Office of Law or staff would communicate those views and the potential challenges to an applicant before they came to a hearing.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think there's any sense in publicly discussing this, you know, our different views on how that might be handled if there's such a question raised. In
Mhm.
terms of the board's rules and procedures, you know, ordinarily we make our case, and then if there's any opposition, the opposition would make their case, and we can have a chance as applicants to respond to issues raised by the opposition and answer questions by the board. So one point I'd make there is that after we make our case and describe our application, the board will, of course, at some point close that record and deliberate, but it's appropriate for us to have a chance to respond to comments raised by the public or the board. And in the case of a legal question, to discuss the legal analysis from the Office of Law, if they're going to be providing a view as to why we can't have a conditional approval for this evening.
Yeah.
So with that said, let me just do what I was going to do initially, what I planned to do this evening.
Let me interrupt you real quick. I need to accept the exhibits into the record right now. Okay, so for 79 Franklin Street, Exhibit C1 is the application dated, I think it's 12/29, but something, there's other people need to date those applications.
That's correct.
Okay. C2 is a revision dated the 1/22/21. The staff report, C3, dated February 2nd, 21, and the photographs dated C4. I'm not sure the date on the photographs.
It's undated.
Undated. Okay. C4 is the photographs, undated. Okay. Thank you. And site visits, who among the commissioners did site visits? I did. And it looks like Bill, Will, Kim, did you do a site visit?
No, I'm afraid I didn't.
Okay. All right. Tammy, does that deal with that?
That's good. Thank you.
All right. So we'll hear from the applicant, and then we'll have a discussion about completeness of the application, and we'll go from there. So go ahead, Phil.
Okay, so procedurally, the staff report is correct in noting that we are going for a variance and special exception before the Board of Appeals on the 17th of this month. The understanding of the applicant is that the staff would be supportive, the Office of Planning and Zoning staff would be supportive of those applications. They are for the use of the property, the planned use of the property as a law office, which is permitted by special exception in the P district. And just for everyone's context here, the applicant is seeking to do a law office on a site that is below a square footage threshold, for which above which would not require special exception, which is counterintuitive and a bit backwards of our code. But she wouldn't even need a special exception for this use, or the site actually a little larger. And then the variances are being required by staff, the Department of Planning and Zoning staff, for side yards, front yards, and parking setbacks, with the exception to the ADA lift, which we agree requires a variance to be in the side yard. The other requests for variances, which we've consented to and made, are all for existing features of this building. Just to be very clear, the applicant isn't proposing to change anything on the exterior of this business other than the ADA ramp, which is required. This is not an application where someone's coming in and looking to redesign a building or remodel it to suit their needs, and then asking HPC for approval of something that is of one of their desires. The only thing that the applicant is doing to the building is to add the ADA ramp, and the initial proposal was to add it on the front of the building, and then at the direction of staff, we flexible and adjusted that to add in a different location on the side of the building. So in every sense, the applicant is trying to minimize and cooperate with the direction from staff to allow for an adaptive reuse of a building without changing it in any way, for a use which is permitted by special exception in this case, but also straight permitted strict as a by right use for larger properties. And so if you had a larger office and a larger site, you wouldn't even need to be seeking that those approvals. So with regard to the actual changes to the building that are necessitated just for ADA compliance, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Miles. And then when we come back to discussing completeness of the application and the opinions of this commission, the Office of Law, as to requirements for completeness, or what the commission considers to be a complete application, or staff thinks is a complete application, I'll pick back up and join again.
Okay.
And just because this is a bit of a surprise and a curveball for us, I think it would be helpful for me to relate to the members of the commission that, given that sounds like we're going to have to come back here again after the 17th, it will be helpful to know, to the extent possible, any substantive concerns. We've already been once and heard some of the concerns or suggestions about changes that could be made to do this differently.
You're referring to the
There are still any
pre-application.
thoughts that we can address now that would be very helpful, because the applicants, Chairman Lee, are you trying to?
Yeah, you're referring to the pre-application.
Yes. So we've got some good direction from the commission there. And if there's more direction, that would be very helpful, or to get to a sense of comfort that we will be able to get to an approval, as you alluded to earlier, Chairman Leahy, because in adjusting the applicant's contract on the building, it's going to be helpful for them to know whether they've got question marks from this commission, rather than just procedural necessities of coming back with a completed application because the special exception variance has been approved at that point. So with that, let me turn it over, and I'll wait to join again.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now. Last time I shared my screen, are we still doing that? Should I share my screen and bring up the drawings?
If you can, yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so the board will recall we were here for a pre-application hearing in December, and very useful comments were given. So we've taken those comments into account. I think Phil has done the summary. So just a refresher, our constraint here is the ADA requires that you have a site arrival point and then access to the building from that site arrival point. So the property, if we just go to the site plan, which I'll zoom in on, is existing construction is such that there's only a 2-foot setback from the building to property line on the left side. And on the right side, you have 2.8 feet. Both of those are too small to have an accessible route. And the parking, there's existing parking located at the front off of Franklin Street. So the only possible accessible route is to have an entrance near the front. So when we came in for the pre-application, the first time, the lift was adjacent to the porch, and we had a discussion, and it was suggested that the lift be moved back off of the primary facade, and that this window shown right here on the side be removed, and we can install a new door in that location. That was looked upon favorably because it's reversible. We will save the siding and the window and the other components. They will be stored in the building, so it can be reversed at a later date if needed. And on this drawing, we have the parking space in the front, a new concrete walk with the existing walk will be widened, and then an accessible lift is installed with screening. So the accessible lift will go up to a new door. Actually, let me just jump ahead here. So here's a photograph of the existing door. You can see it through, there's a screen door. So of course we won't have a storm door, but you can see that it's about a 3/4 light door. So there's a large light in a panel below. This is the cut sheet for the new door that will be installed. So we're matching that style. The door is fir. It will be painted to match the front door. And then this diagram walks us through the accessible route from the parking space up to the lift into the building. And then it's just a matter of the details. So from the front elevation, the lift is quite minimal. There's a platform at the top. So you enter the lift, go up a platform and turn to the left and go in through the door. So we have a new wood railing. This was one of the points of discussion, is that we do not want to match the existing iron railing at the front because it's not historic and doesn't fit with the style of the building. So from the left elevation, you can see you have a railing here. This wood lattice that's below is removable. So the basement windows that you see in the photos, they will not be removed. And the lattice is removable for maintenance and cleaning of those windows. And also for maintenance for the lift. This diagram was requested by Roberta. So this shows, just to be clear, in order to have, you can have the lift raised so that you can have maintenance underneath and cleaning underneath if necessary. And then otherwise it's very straightforward. So all wood construction, simple clean wood railing, wood lattice used below for screening. It was suggested that we look at the neighborhood and other houses. So I did a pretty thorough survey going about 3 or 4 blocks away from this property to the west and to the north. And every home that has a wooden front porch has wood lattice. So there are homes that are brick, and they have brick or they have stone or they have something else. But in every instance where it's a wooden porch, it's paired with wood lattice. And maybe a couple instances where they have vinyl, but that shouldn't be there. So this is to show just existing conditions. So we're emulating the front door. These windows here will remain. This window will be salvaged. The trim, the siding below the window will be salvaged and stored probably in the basement. And this is just a cutaway elevation to show the new door. I apologize, actually, we're installing adjacent to the window because the lift has to be far enough back to be fully off the street. So existing window remains, siding is salvaged, new door, these windows will remain. You can see dotted in here the outline of the lift. So the only, for the purposes of these drawings in this call, really, the only comment in the staff report has to do with whether or not the mast for the lift should be screened as an extension of the lattice, or if plantings would be sufficient. So this piece right here is called the mast. So that's the part the lift travels up and down on that piece, and that's what makes everything work. And that looks, it's screened in this photo. They have a diagram lower down. So this component right here is the mast.
Mm-hmm.
So that piece we had proposed, and this was in the initial discussions with staff as well, having plantings to screen that. There has been, the consulting architect to review the staff report suggested extending the screening of the wood lattice and suggested that as a condition for conditional approval. So we would be fine with that. It is my personal opinion that would actually draw more attention to the mast. But certainly if the board feels that that's a relevant condition, then we would have no problem complying. And I believe that covers everything.
Thank you.
Okay.
Peter, Mr. Chairman, I think because of what we know about the circumstances of this matter tonight, it would be my suggestion that the board take its opportunity to ask questions of Peter.
Exactly. Our next step is that the commission ask questions of the applicant.
Well,
and then we'll discuss the issues of completeness. And so yes, the next step, Phil, is that's what we do.
well, just in the sense that there are essentially 2 different issues here with procedure and substance. And my suggestion was only that we go to the substance stuff and then, we come
Correct.
back to questions for me later.
Correct. Yeah. So do any commissioners have any questions for Peter regarding the application?
No, pretty clear.
No.
No. Okay. I think we're clear. So the application would, as it's presented here, shows the lattice work, correct, Peter?
Yes.
As opposed to the plantings. So that's what we have before us. All right. So it doesn't actually require a condition in the application. It is as submitted.
Well, no, so let me clarify that. We have lattice here. My understanding is the report suggested screening this entire mast with the lattice in the application.
Okay.
So we did not extend the lattice to the mast in this application.
So that would, okay, so that would be something in the final submission that you would need to revise. Okay,
And that
Thank
would
you.
allow for the condition to be removed, so it wouldn't be needful.
correct. That's what I would suggest. Okay. So the no other commissions. So on to the procedural issue of completeness. We are prevented from approving applications that do not have all zoning applications completed, and that is in section 21. It's in the zoning code. It's not in the HPC code. 21.10.010H. And our approval, HPC approval, is required to be last. And it is important so the sequence occurs equally for all applicants. So that being said, I would be recommending that we continue this until your Board of Appeals occurs, and that the way this becomes evident to us, at least, is that in the Trackit system, it appears as approved by zoning. So we're not saying all the certificates need to be there, but it needs to be approved by zoning. And in Trackit right now, this application is not approved. And so I consulted the Office of Law on this, and they explained to me, and I'm explaining this to the commissioners, that we could not grant approval on this application tonight.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to respond here, I pulled that code section. That is the common procedures for review of applications.
Correct. Coordinated.
I think it's important that everybody understand that's what you're citing. And to the Office of Law, your president, or to the chair, if you want to answer this question, what specifically is it that you're saying? We've done this before at the commission level where there's been condition approvals. Why is it that the coordinated processing of applications can't be done in this case? What is it about H that prevents? Oh, I see. You're the last clause.
The very last sentence.
Maybe that was overlooked in previous approvals.
If that was overlooked, it's not being overlooked now. That's all I can say.
Mr. Chair, may I speak?
Sure.
I appreciate that you are bringing this forward. In my time on the Planning Commission, this was sometimes a point of intense discussion. And I think it's the law sometimes is inconvenient. And I think we all know that. But in this case, it's very valuable to see that the process is followed consistently by all applicants. And I think Mr. Dales also knows that the ignorance of the law is no excuse for inaction. So anyway, I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't think this is a point for us to belabor. Mr. Dale can take it up with the city attorney or any other city official, but you're doing what you must do as the chair of the commission. And I thank you for doing so.
So I think in my closing, my comment would be to the Office of Law, if something like this comes up, for the orderly, and to save everybody from wasting time, that it'd be very valuable to the applicants to hear this view, well, instead of hearing it at the hearing, to have this communicated in advance so that we can change our schedules, make the applications come in different order. Right. Although it is helpful tonight to hear your views on the substantive issues in the application.
Exactly. If we had pursued that back in December, we wouldn't be talking right now. So I think the office, the Chief of Historic Preservation, tries to move forward, assuming that during our 45-day period, these things will be resolved, that the schedules did not align. So it could have been stopped back then, but it hasn't been. So I think we're trying to accommodate the applicant.
Understood. To be clear, that's not what I was saying. I was saying that if there's a view that could not be approved tonight, that, and this view is that the procedural
I get it.
That would have been helpful to know that for us even 3 days ago. But leaving that in the past, I think I would ask for the chair or the chief to let us know if they're what the next available agenda will be for us after the 17th, so that we can work
I think we can accommodate. This is not an application that has a lot of issues regarding it, and I'd be happy to put you on the administrative meeting later this month as old business, assuming you get approval on the Board of Appeals. And I think that's the 28th, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember the exact date, but the last Thursday in February. And so there aren't substantive issues either from staff or from anyone else. So I'd be happy to put you on that agenda.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. That being said, I'm going to propose that we continue this application. We will leave, the record will remain open. Actually, let me step back one more step. I can also, during this proceeding, open public testimony and accept any public testimony at this point, and take care of that from, again, rules of procedure, so we don't have to go over that again. We did not receive any public testimony on this application, which we do virtually these days. And that being said, I will be also opening it and therefore closing it. So that's another step that we can take in this situation in terms of continuation. The record remains
Mr. Chair,
open.
this is Roberta. Do you want to take this opportunity for me to make any comments? Like, as
Actually,
in a staff report?
Yeah, that would be, that's another thing we can do according to our procedure, is go ahead and do the staff report, then that will be even more brief in the final meeting. Thank you, Roberta, for reminding me of that.
Sure. I don't have much to add. I did not add a condition about covering the lift. Peter could, you've got it right there.
Yes.
On the mast. I didn't have a strong opinion about lattice versus plantings. To me, it's whatever fits. So I did not add that as a condition. So I just let the commission know about that. Also, the condition that I have related to an HPC revision form, I just wanted to make it clear that if anything dramatic changes in this as a result of the special exception, the variances, and ultimately the building permit, that it would require public hearing as opposed to administrative review. It's just a matter of going over the administrative review guidelines and determining whether a proposed change has to be met through administrative or public hearing. So that's why I worded that condition that way, but it sounds like, Mr. Dales, you are accepting that. And then the other condition was about the on-site framing. I did just want to also mention that I wanted the commission to understand that you have to get onto this lift and go up and then over onto the platform. So it's not like you're getting up on the platform. There is a separate piece which has been clearly shown. And then there's a little ramp that also has to be in front of that rusticated pier. So that is a matter of being careful in construction of that rusticated pier, and also in whatever access takes place in the form of a ramp toward the lift, because now I believe the access to the crawl space is right there on that side, and that might have to move. So I just, in my staff report, I wanted to make it clear how someone would actually use the lift and what would be involved in what you would have to clear. So that has nothing to do with approval. It was just a matter of making sure everyone understood how a disabled person would actually get into the building. Mm-hmm. And then if I could just lighten this up a little bit, I wanted anyone listening and whoever hasn't read it to know that, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, but the house was built in 1913 for Adolf Turovsky and his wife, and he was a prominent member of the Naval Academy Band, and he had studied with Johann Strauss in Vienna. And he was the 7th leader of the Naval Academy Band and made their first commercial recording June of 1920, released by the Columbia Gramophone Company. So just
Thank you.
introducing a little bit of lightness here at the end of
Thank you.
kind of a difficult discussion.
So Roberta, I would like to ask a question about this lattice, because I think, and I will say why we didn't recommend it in the first place. So the suggestion, to be clear, is for the lattice to go where this blue rectangle is. So, historically, lattice is going to sit below the horizontal plane of a porch or something like that. And I think to have this break the plane and stick up vertically beyond the horizontal plane of both the front porch and the lift and the railing is somewhat ahistorical. And, we all acknowledge that an accessible lift is not something that is part of the historic fabric. So I think that having a tall vertical element like this made out of historic materials adjacent to the wood lattice is going to draw extra attention to it rather than screening the lift. So I would just like to have, if we could, because we have to come back, clarity about this. So the drawings we submit are the drawings that will be approved.
Yeah, let me chime in. Again, I'm trying to be very procedural here. That would be something we would talk about in deliberations, but in the interest of moving this forward, I think I personally hear what you're saying. Other commissioners may chime in. Also, it was not in the staff report to approve that. So, and any other commissioners would like to chime in on that question, let me know. All right, it wasn't in the staff report, so the staff report doesn't need to change, and the drawings do not need to change then, as we move forward.
Mr. Chair, one other
Phil.
request regarding timing. I was thinking about a few things with the past projects that have had HPC approval before, and it may have been the view at the time that the approval didn't become effective until after the Board of Appeals or Planning Commission approvals, or it may have been that they decided they would be administratively addressed after the approvals, and that was the final HPC approval to address this part of the code. But what's different now because of COVID, and what I'm asking for a scheduling answer on is that currently the Board of Appeals is hearing cases and then leaving the public record open until the next meeting because they want to have people who view the meeting have an opportunity to send in testimony. And so the public record in this case is open with the Board of Appeals until March 2nd. If that means that the approval from HPC should be the meeting immediately after that, then I'd ask for us to, maybe if it's the opinion of the Office of Law that approval can be given at your end of February meeting, then we appreciate that and would like to go then. If it is the opinion that it needs to be after March 2, then we'd ask to be on the very first meeting and know when that might be.
Yes, that would be March 9th. So if indeed it does not appear to be approved, again, what I'm using as our marker is approved by the offices of the zoning office in Trackett. So if that doesn't occur, you can certainly be on the March 9th agenda.
Mr. Chair, also a point of clarification. If I know you've said that you're using Trackett, which I don't think does have that much legal status in it, but I don't object to it. If I were to provide you a letter from the Office of Law or the Office of Planning and Zoning saying that it has approvals, would that also suffice?
Yes. There's something called a zoning permit, which is not used apparently, or it takes a while to get issued. And so it's a longer term. So, no, but I believe a letter would be fine.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So it's March 9th, the end of February meeting.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, this application for 79 Franklin Street is continued until either the end of February or the early March HPC meeting. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Okay. Next on the agenda is 61 Franklin Street.
Tim, on these exhibits, I just noticed that there was an additional one added. So it goes from C1 through C6.
Mm-hmm.
And I can read it if you would prefer, but there was a third revision form added, and that's going to be C4.
C4, okay.
And then C5 will be the staff report, and C6 would be the photograph dated 1/21.
Okay. I'm looking for the revision. It's the third revision.
Right, I don't think it was in the Dropbox. I know when I pulled the folder, it was in there. I'm not sure if it was in the Dropbox.
Yeah, I do not see it in the Dropbox, so we'll ask the applicant to present it to us this evening.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So 61 Franklin, clicking around here. Mark, can you promote, who do we have?
Purple Cherry Architects are all.
The whole gang, masked up. Okay, so I'm going to get your exhibits put into the record, and then we'll ask about site visits. Exhibit C1 is the application dated 12/23/20. C2 is revision 1 dated 1/22/21. Revision 2, which is, I guess, C3, dated 1/27/21. C4, which we'll see this evening. Tammy, what was the date on that?
January 29th.
January 29th. The staff report is C5, dated February 2nd, and photos undated is C6. All right. And commissioners who visited the site, I did. Will did, Bobby did. Kim?
I didn't, no.
Bill? Okay, no, okay. All right, I drive by it every day, so I can't locate it.
Was not able to make it.
Okay. So we're going to do the same procedure here, and we will confront the same issues we just talked about a minute ago, but the applicant should make their presentation, and then we'll discuss the completeness of the application. Again, zoning issues are important, and just to let you know, there are some things in this that are clear in the staff report that are not there yet, but in the interest of moving this forward, we'd like to go ahead and hear the application tonight, listen to the staff report, have public testimony, and then we will we'll see what we do. But there are some open zoning issues on this application as well. Yes, Will.
Just before we begin, I have no disagreement with your recommended procedure for this evening, but I would like to note that I'm very troubled by a substantive major application of this kind that has so many unanswered questions and unresolved issues, especially the site survey, the bounds survey. So I think it's very awkward to take all of our time to go through this when so much could still be changed before another hearing if necessary. And I think it's very necessary to have that other hearing, because I don't think it's proper for us to approve or disapprove this application this evening.
I hear what you're saying. As we talked about on the prior application, the intent of the office, the Historic Preservation Office, was to give that 45-day time to have these things resolved. And we can move forward and get things into the record so that the next meeting will be shorter. There are multiple items on this, so there's a technicality that prevents us, I believe, from approving it tonight. So the idea is that get stuff into the record now on the behalf of the applicant. Good customer service, get it into the record so that our next meeting can be briefer. And that's kind of the concept we've always had around continuation.
Oh, I understand and agree with your desire to move the application forward as a service to all involved. But I just think this is a different order and it's beyond what I would feel comfortable acting upon. But you're the chair, you're doing it properly and
Okay.
correctly, and I support that.
Okay, thank you. So that's the issue at hand.
Yeah.
So that being said, let's turn it over to have the applicant present the presentation.
Yeah.
And then we'll discuss the completeness issues. Please do tell us what's in revision 3.
Okay, Kim,
Go ahead.
I've actually, for one moment, I'm going to let the team do the presentation. They'll do the presentation as though nobody has heard it before, because it seems we need to go ahead and present it that way. But I do want to address one comment. We received this list of comments with the notice that we had 24 to 48 hours to get responses back on everything. We knew that 48 hours was not enough time. We actually reached out to Roberta because there are comments that have to do with the grading and the building permit piece that don't apply to the HPC piece.
Yep.
We were instructed that we were not to submit those, that we didn't need it. So I appreciate, Mr. Scott, that you may not be aware that when the comment letter comes over, it gives the applicant 24 to 48 hours to respond back. And that's just not enough time. So that I'm just going on record. It can't happen that way. Second of all, with regards to the zoning thing, we do have a sign and seal survey. We do have a sign and seal survey that is having a dimension. We know that we've done that sign and seal survey over to Jackie. That comes out of Bay Engineering. The engineer who was working on it literally went on vacation. Mike Gillespie jumped in to try to wrap it up. We do not have an issue, but I appreciate, Mr. Scott, that you still need that document in front of you. You do have a signed and sealed survey. However, you needed a dimension added to it. So I know that has to come in, okay? So, Mr. Leahy, should they present as though it's brand new? Is that the way you want them to present? Even though we've been in 2 pre-apps, I just want to make sure that we address it properly.
No, I think in the interest of everyone's time, we have seen this application. It's complicated. We have seen it twice. I think it's important to probably focus on the things that have changed from the pre-application and how you've adopted the comments from the office. So,
does it help if, in fact, we actually just go through the comments and just do quick response to each of the staff comments? Does that help?
Yes, that makes some sense.
Okay.
And yes, so please let us know which ones you believe you have addressed. I've crossed them off on some of mine with the revisions, but please let us know the ones you believe you've addressed.
That would be great. So let's just go through if everybody has this.
Is everyone, I assume commissioners, we're okay with that. Looking around the room. Yeah, okay.
Great.
Go ahead.
Okay. Let's start with the first one. So the comment, we're not sure, honestly, where some of these comments are coming from, so we need further clarification. So for example, the further subordinate the roof of both additions from copper to a material suitable for secondary additions. I think I would challenge secondary additions of a wood-shaped roof have always been copper, so we're not sure what the commissioners are looking for.
All right.
We don't understand that. That's a brand new comment to us. So can you help clarify what
actually,
you mean by subordinate?
I'd like to separate that kind of thing into that would be a question during deliberation. So when we get to that point, we as a commission can discuss that comment from staff, but
Okay.
we would weigh in on deliberation, because I understand where you're going, but that would be in deliberation, which is later.
Okay, so I'll give you instead, I'll go really fast and I'll give you what each of our responses would have been. So the next one about subordinating the mass of the chimneys, we will want further clarification, because this would be the 3rd time that we would change it, which is fine. You can give us that deliberation.
Yeah, I think you're, if I'm not mistaken, you've actually changed that in the current submission.
We did.
Yes.
Because the last time it was make it different, so we did. You're correct.
Okay.
That's very correct. But we're not sure why now it's saying to further subordinate them again when we changed them stylistically. We're not sure where that's coming from. We just need some input on that. Specify the chimney as masonry, we note that. Acknowledge it. Specify the electric lights as opposed to gas, noted. Specify the third floor egress windows / casements. You want to answer that?
They're simulated double hungs in all the drawings that you have.
That's how they're currently drawn. So they are an egress / casement with a rail. In terms of the HVAC system, sprinkler meters, etc., we noted we'll provide at a later time because that for us is historically tied to building permit applications and where those things go. But if you need those for HPC purposes, that's a great example of giving us 24 hours to determine that. We need to talk to the general contractor.
HVAC locations are always included in HPC applications.
Perfect. Okay. So next, landscape. Obviously, we're speaking on behalf of Kevin Campion, but noted with regards to the trees, noted with regards to the protection, noted with regards to the aerial hedge height, noted. And then last, it says height of the pergola. It says see landscape drawings. The section of the pergola has a dimension on it.
I think you provided that in the most recent one.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one on the consulting architect, again, we would ask for clarification on the chimney. I'm not understanding. So the idea, I think the next question has to do with that to differentiate the second floor of the addition with siding versus doing it all in trim. Correct?
I'd like to defer that to the
That's perfectly
discussion.
Fine. That, no problem. Obviously, our client, we would still say that the trim is just as appropriate as siding, and that's what we would advocate for. Plan reviewer, existing basement foundation and proposed crawl space drawings, we will submit with building permit. That was something that I believe you guys, did you ask for Berta if the building permit? We did ask for Berta if the building permit.
I believe this one, I believe this one is a zoning requirement.
What do you mean? I'm
The,
sorry to ask that. The foundation drawings usually come during the construction document set, so that would be filed with the building permit.
but plans review is part of the zoning approval. It's right now holding up the approval in, again, I'm using Trackit as our record. So the plans review right now is holding it up because of this is not in their hands.
So let me just share with you where I think a little bit of the confusion is coming from. So been a long time, but never has an HPC review process taken a set of drawings to construction documents. And basically there are a few comments in here that have to do with construction documents, building filing. And so when those comments came over, which were totally new to me after 35 years, needing that we need a foundation drawing when that's a structural engineering component of construction documents, that's where the team did reach back and ask Roberta, what should we do? You know, we can't turn that around in 48 hours.
Right.
So that's new to us. Got it?
I get it.
Okay, so if that level of documentation is needed for full approval, we're happy to comply.
Okay.
But it comes as total new news to what I know is the general process of HPC. Okay? Okay.
Understood. And like I said, we are all learning. The technicality is zoning puts something in as approved in Trackit. We're not asking you to wait for the zoning certificate, which may be quite a bit later. But until they have signed off on all components, the HPC cannot approve.
I understand that.
That's
completely. I understand the comment completely.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. Well,
this is only highlighting my concerns about reviewing this application tonight. I understand and sympathize with the applicant's architect and the concern about turnaround time, but the applicant has the alternative of asking for a new date to give time to review and supply the requested documentation and information. So I don't think that this is a burden that's been put upon us or we've put upon them. It's the city's process, the city's code. They have to follow it and we have to follow it. So I really think we're pushing this forward in a way that could actually complicate our review process.
I hear what you're saying. And I think though it is appropriate for us to at least begin the process, it can't finish.
Oh yeah, now that we've started it, I would like to hear them finish it.
I
but
think we've, yes.
Very
yes,
much waiting to hear for the staff's response to.
Yes, so we've
all of these
learned
issues.
something, and
Right, so Mr. Scott, you need to know that so historically what happens is we would get notification and then we would have a time to be able to turn around. My team did reach out to Roberta and asked, do we need these things for the hearing? Should we, whatever? And at any point in time, the communication could have gone, yes, we definitely need it. We need those items closed. We recommend that you delay. That could have come out, that could have been recommended to us. That is not what was recommended to us, so we're here tonight.
Yeah.
Okay?
well,
Understood.
you've actually moved ahead. Again, I want to reiterate, this could have been stopped back and as not eligible to be even on the docket. So you're I believe, again, we're trying to move you forward.
And we appreciate that very much.
Okay.
So
All
let's
right.
do the next one, stormwater management. Obviously, you typically files with the grading permit. We know
Yes,
that it's
those are with the building permit. Those are not, I've learned in the last few weeks, the last few days, that is not before the HPC approval. That's not a zoning.
no problem. So then I go into the next one where the HPC says the recommendation is based on the furthering conditions. And I don't think we don't have any concern about, we don't have any concern with compliance with regards to the items that are identified. So, so I think that's it from our end.
All right, and those recommendations will end up with some modifications to drawings.
They may, yeah, we need to hear further input with regards to the chimney. We need to hear why a copper roof isn't subordinate to a wood shake roof. We need to understand those things because those are new comments, I think.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So from a procedural point of view, again, now at this point, I confer with the commissioners to say, do we have enough information? Is this a complete application? We know we cannot approve it, but is it complete with the exception of a zoning approval? So then we would move on to Roberta's report, and then we would move on to public testimony, opening and closing. Again, moving it through those steps so we don't have to repeat them.
Yeah.
Commissioners, do you concur we should move forward to Roberta's report?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I don't think that I would say in a perfect world that this is complete enough to proceed, but because we've heard the architect's presentation and she's asked many pertinent questions, I do want to hear Ms. Lehner's responses.
Great. Okay. Kim, are you in concurrence with us?
I concur.
Okay, great. Okay, Roberta?
I would just like to start by saying that I don't agree with the earlier comments. I have been doing this for 5 years now, and I have 100% accuracy. And I explained from the beginning that it was extremely important to follow all of my requests and to have an application. My goal is to have it as complete as possible to bring it to approval. I do have to say that there were times that we needed a quick turnaround because we weren't getting the answers that we needed. And also I warned the applicants of the danger of not responding to reviewer comments. So if you would like to talk about specific items that I mentioned as a result of the staff report, if you want to start with my recommendation to subordinate the roof on the additions, I did suggest that it become a different, that it be specified as a different type of metal. Copper is a more elevated material that keeps it from being a secondary material. And I explained that in the staff report. The chimneys have been changed again, but they are massive. They're even wider. I was told that's because of code requirement for the size of the flue. The flue can change, the size of the chimney can change. It still is, it is different now, but it is, in staff's opinion, not secondary. There seemed to be no question on the need to specify what the masonry is. That's a basic requirement. And also, the bonding of the chimney. There seemed to be agreement. I noticed in the spec that the lights could be gas or electric. So we always ask for stating specifically on a cut sheet exactly what you're ordering. So that's why I mentioned that. I stand corrected if the casements on the egress windows were designed with a meeting rail. I didn't see that. HVAC is a typical specification for locating exterior units and all the other parts, the meters, the vents, the sprinkler connection, and any new excavation. Often new excavation is needed for a sprinkler. Landscape, the commission has, I think, 11 or so guidelines on landscape. So landscape is an important aspect of an application, and we don't have the details we need yet on that. The consulting architect, again, he also stated, but I had already written this ahead of time, making the new chimneys much more subordinate in scale. Now, the siding, this is something that the commission can deliberate. The consulting architect recommended that because the panel siding, excuse me, I'm going to get to my note. He felt that there could be a more unified differentiation of the changes. So some of the changes require or have been specified with siding, and then the main west addition is specified with like a panel system. He felt that it would be more compatible with the guideline SOI 10 that asks for massing, size, scale, and architectural features to be compatible. So the panel system makes the addition too primary or prominent and not secondary to the main house. That is easily something that could be deliberated. And that the addition should be subordinate in massing, height, scale, and detail. As of this evening, we did not have approval in Trackit that there was a boundary survey. So the zoning has not been approved. The foundation, it seems to me that the commission needs to see whatever is going to be seen and exterior. And if there's any part of that foundation that will be seen, I agree then with the plans reviewer that HPC needs to see it. He definitely needs to see it for his building permit. In my feeling, the commission needs to see it if it is going to be an exterior and visible feature. And then lastly was the grading permit application. Now, I have said in here that the commission needs to concur or disagree with the strategy to put off some of these reviews to the building permit stage. So I've made a nice long list here, and the commission can decide what is important to be able to review this. When I got the final drawings and needed to complete the staff report, I said to myself, if I was a commissioner, I would not be able to finish my review. So that is why I created this list. I also wrote a list of, in the interest of time, I wrote a list of conditions that would ultimately be added to as part of this approval. So let me ask John Tower if you want to add anything.
I will wait until further meetings, until it's reviewed in the future. My only objection to this particular application is that in some ways, because materials that are significant for the structure are being moved to new locations, it gives a false sense of history. I'm disappointed that the leaded glass windows will be prominently featured, but it's certainly better than having them removed and not reused. In terms of the dormers and how they're affected by the two-story addition, again, it's unfortunate. We have guidelines that recommend against it. But on the whole, I think that this is a worthwhile project, and I'm looking forward to it continuing.
Yeah, so we'll take all that under consideration during deliberations. The key is the lack of the property survey at this point. And it, like the prior application, we are prevented from approving it in this particular meeting. So I've reiterated that. And I think that Roberta's comments and her recommendations give possibility some potential changes for the next round. But if the applicant chose not to and we would deliberate it, that would be fine too.
Jim, can I ask
Sure.
a quick question? Okay, so what I know is the Bay Engineering signed and sealed their survey. And I know that that signed and sealed survey was submitted. I believe zoning has that signed and sealed survey. I know that that is in the city's hands.
I'm not aware of that. We do not have that in the application. So
Is Jackie here?
yeah, I think Jackie Rouse, you mean? Yes, she happens to be here. Thank you for joining us, Jackie. It would need to be approved from the way we're working with this now. Zoning approval needs to have happened, and Roberta says it has not happened. It's not in Tracket.
Okay.
I don't have a side. There is no signed and sealed survey. I emailed you all about that today. When you were going to have a signed and sealed survey that showed all the property lines as well as the existing setbacks of all existing structures from the property lines. I don't have that.
Right.
So that's where we are.
I mean, I've asked for that since December, and it was December 28th, and we still don't have that specific document.
So
I'm not really sure I understand why that's confusing.
It's okay, but when was the signed and sealed submitted? Okay, so the signed and sealed survey was submitted on January 29th. I appreciate that COVID or whatever is causing, things, and I get that. But it was submitted, and it was also.
I do not have a signed and sealed boundary survey for the property submitted on January 29th. You did submit a sealed document for the average front yard setbacks for Dean Street, but I still do not have what I'm talking about. And I've talked to your staff about this repeatedly, Kathy. I don't know what to say.
Yep, you need, it's not for us, it's for Bay Engineering.
Okay, you need to communicate that to them then.
Mr.
You're the
Chair,
applicant.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, we
Yeah,
are spinning our wheels unproductively, and there are so many issues, more issues raised by Ms. Laner's very clear and direct
You're
comments.
correct. You're correct.
I really wish we would just stop this at this moment rather than
That's
trying
fine.
to.
I appreciate that. It is between the applicant and the Office of Zoning. So I appreciate that. So you all can work that out. Moving ahead, we can also deal with public hearing, public comment at this point. There were no public comments submitted, so I can open public comments and close them. So that is in the record. If there are significant changes of any sort between now and the final application, it is possible to reopen public hearing. But at this point, we can step over that.
Yep.
and then move on. This application is going to need to be continued because it does not comply right now with the zoning applications that are approvals that are needed. So that's where we are on that. All right. Thank you.
I do want to say that I think this is a very worthwhile project, though, and I look forward to a
course.
successful resolution.
Are we, so are we getting, so just so I know, are we allowed to ask for the feedback specifically, or should we just work directly with Roberta?
Work with Roberta, work with Roberta, and then we will deliberate on the comments if you don't necessarily, you might not agree, and we might not agree. So we'll deal with that in deliberation when it occurs. And again, we'll make every accommodation we can after the approval occurs to get you on an agenda. I need you to I'll go ahead and waive the 45-day rule in terms of action. We actually have acted on it tonight, but that 45-day rule is something we traditionally ask you to waive and would ask you to do that now. Okay, I'm seeing you nodding, so. All right, and we'll work with you to get you on an agenda.
Yeah, we need to understand what you just asked us. What 45-day rule?
Yeah, if there's a rule that says if the commission doesn't act on an application within 45 days of its submission, then it is deemed approved. It is deemed approved. In the past, we've waived. You need to waive that. As it turns out, the way the code is written, I'm getting a little more expert on this. We've acted on it tonight, so we have complied with that 45-day rule. But we just need to be aware if we didn't hear it tonight, we would have been subject to that rule. But we ask you to waive that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, it's a new one. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. Look forward to next application. Thank you. Good night. All right. Moving on to the next application is 9 Shipwright. I see Jay. We can promote Jay. And while we're doing that, I'll read the exhibits into the record. C1 is the application dated 12/23, 2020. There was also an addendum from the pre-app dated 10/13/2020. Revision 1 dated 1/22/2021. The staff report dated 2/2/21, and C5 undated are photos. And site visits, I did. Drove down the street.
I did.
I didn't kayak in front of it, but.
I did not visit this one.
Okay. All right, Tammy. Do you have everything you need, Tammy?
What about Mr. Williams? Did he?
Bill has to recuse himself at this point.
Okay, thank you.
From the application, and he'll come back later. So you can put it in the record that Bill is recusing himself from this application.
Thank you.
Okay. So Jay, again, you've heard the prior discussions. what we'd like to do is go ahead and move the application forward and discuss if there are any missing components regarding completeness. So I think that things have happened over the last few days, which you can fill us in on. So why don't you make a presentation? We'll talk about completeness and things that might not be in the application yet, and then we'll hear the staff report.
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate the opportunity, and I also appreciate Mr. Scott's opinion on all this. As a matter of fact, we received this 6 days before today's meeting, and had enough time to reply to Planning and Zoning's zoning variance opinion, and that has been resolved. And if you go to E-Track, the zoning has been approved.
Yeah, I understand that to be the case as well, and so does Roberta. So this is a good example of where we are able to, from that point of view, understand that it is approved in E-Track.
Yes, thank you. We've had a number of pre-apps, and I appreciate all that. I'm happy to walk through the project. We have provided additional detailing and clarifications. If I look at, and I'm happy to do that now, but if I look at the staff recommendations, I can just comment on those in a short
I think that's
period.
useful.
We have not done a landscape plan as of yet. There is no current landscaping on the property. There's grass on the water side. So that is on our to-do list. We have not, there is no landscaping as of now. The plans review or comments we've not seen. There is a civil survey. He wants additional information with a elevation certificate. That's in process, and that is really part of the construction or the permit reviewer side. That's
Yeah,
not
just
zoning.
for the other commissioners, these are things that have to do with the building permit and not the zoning review. So we need to act based on zoning, not the building permit. So and Jay is correct. Those civil site plan and elevation.
The stormwater engineer, again, is part of the permit process. And that is the list of things that we did not provide so far. And we see nothing in the recommendations that we can't approve, can't agree to.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to walk through the whole project again if you'd like. Or I'm happy to turn it back over to Roberta and listen.
Okay. Thank you. I think we've seen the project. I see some other things that are not in the application at this point. I don't see a fence permit application, which is required before HPC.
That was a separate revision, I believe.
That was supplied. Thank you.
Yes,
I did not see it. And a demolition application.
that's included.
There's no need in the building permit side to have a separate demolition application. We've crossed that path with zoning and with the building permit office.
There's no demolition required for the demolition of an existing building. So
It's within our documents to demolish, and that's part of the scope of the work. We're happy to put in another application if we need to, but we talked to planning, zoning, as well as the permit office about that. And that was not required. Our understanding was it was not required.
it's on the checklist for the HPC application.
Happy to do that.
So, okay. So these are things that are required. And the landscape plan also, again, now we're getting into the completeness discussion, which I'd like to poll the other commissioners. The landscape plan is a common requirement. And I believe that would be necessary to have a complete application. So again, we're headed in my mind towards a continuation here with these additional items. Other commissioners have a comment on that or agree with me? Bobby?
Yeah, I did not notice the, am I unmuted? Can you hear me? I can't tell.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've got different screens here. I did not notice that there wasn't a demo application, but I did notice there was not a landscape application.
Yeah.
which tends to be a fairly significant piece of what we review when we review. So
Exactly.
Tim, I agree with you also, but I would note that I think this is an application that is much more manageable. I don't feel it has all the other issues the previous application did, so I'm much more comfortable operating as you're recommending here.
Right, I agree. There aren't as, first of all, it has zoning approval, so it's moved farther. Yeah. So that being said, so we agree that it's almost there, but there are some things that indicate that we can't approve it tonight from a completeness point of view. So let's go to Roberta and get her comments. Again, get through public review, and then I think move forward. Roberta?
Well, since we've all been through 2 pre-apps on this, I don't think I have to go through every guideline, and I appreciate, as usual, Mr. Schwartz and his architect, Sarah Favreau, for providing comments that I loaded separately for the commissioners in case you needed to review back and forth when I agree. There were some items that I considered just partially consistent with the guidelines as opposed to consistent. And so I think the easiest thing to do at this point is just go down, explain my recommendations. So yes, we've crossed a huge barrier with getting the zoning approval at this point. If I could just run down the list, the first thing I had said was make adjustments to reduce height and mass. So what I want the commissioners to consider in their deliberations, in addition to the fact that they said that this was a feasible application in pre-applications, I just want everyone to understand, especially if you haven't been there, to see that this building is now designed to be at the height limit of 32 feet, and it was at 22 feet 10 inches. You should know as well that its neighbors on either side were much lower at 23 feet and 26 feet. So now this is going to be 32 feet. Related to that is the rooftop deck. And again, just because code allows a maximum height and code allows a maximum utility on a roof doesn't mean you have to have it. So on this roof, we have now a large flat roof area. And I measured this off the drawings, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it looked like that was an area about 18 by 27 feet that is flat, which would be 486 square feet. So the question is, are there other flat roofs on this street? This is behind another type of roof, but still shows that it is a flat roof. So in other words, you have the gambrel on the sides, but you do have a flat roof on the top. And then on top of that, you have kind of a widow's walk with mechanicals. So to me, the mass being higher than the neighbors right adjacent to it, and the flat roof surface and the mechanicals on top all add up to it becoming kind of a looming presence on Shipwright Street. John, do you want to add anything to that? You had some thoughts about that.
Well, one of the things that needs to be considered is this house is about 15 feet forward of its next nearest uphill neighbor. So its mass is going to have a strong effect on the streetscape. And that's something that I think the commissioners need to keep in mind as they are deliberating this. It's a significant feature.
Okay, so the next item I mentioned was related to that. So then if not there, then where would the mechanical equipment be located? No other, some of these are more minor, noting the area of new excavations, sample panel, which they always provide for any of the masonry. We need a little more information on the roofs. We have two types of roofing. We have the standing seam metal, and then we have a flat metal. And then I was a little concerned about their comment under D28, where the architect stated, let me get to it. Materials, no contemporary materials will be used where visible from the ground. So the answer to that is no contemporary materials. Up high, down low, no contemporary materials. He's laughing on the exterior.
I couldn't find that reference anywhere, so.
Oh, 28B.
Oh, I see it in the guidelines, and I appreciate it, but I couldn't find in our drawings any reference, so that's why I'm laughing.
Oh, yes, it's not in the drawings. It was in the review
Word
of
document
our
from-
guidelines. So I just want to make sure that's very, very clear.
Yeah.
And the other we already went over.
Mhm.
I listed everything that reviewers had said or that I knew was not included. So again, I said the commissioners can decide what is important to still require. So to me, the deliberating issue, the main deliberating issue here would be the height, the mass, and the widow's walk.
Yeah.
Everything else can be taken care of pretty easily.
Right, thank you. Yeah, where I'm feeling like this is not complete yet is on the landscape planning side of the application, which is a normal, and then we can discuss the massing in our deliberations in a continued meeting. But it again is not a complete application without the landscape planning and some of the other details that are required. And the demolition application is something I would like further clarification on. It's right on our checklist. So with that being said, I'd like to continue this to a future meeting. And again, to the applicant, we are willing to accommodate you if you waive the 45-day rule. We'll get you on an agenda in the near future as soon as the deficiencies or the lack of information is provided.
I appreciate it. We do waive that 45-day, and we look forward to
we do too.
Expeditiously getting stuff back to you.
All right. Thank you.
And do you want to do the public hearing?
Thank you. See, I always forget something. Yes, there were no public comments on this. So therefore I open public comment, nothing submitted, and therefore I close public. And again, just if there are, I don't believe there will be significant changes to this, but if there were major changes, I would have the option to reopen public hearing. So, okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
And again, we'll get this in the near future. All right, thank you. That wraps up our new business. We have two more items on the agenda. We're at 8:30. Would anyone like to take a short break to get a glass of water, and then just 2 minutes, okay, to get a glass of water, and then we'll have Jackie present to us. Okay.
I have mine.
You have yours. I ran out. Okay, I'll be right back then.
Roberta, was that picture taken last summer? She's not there. Or she's not responding.
It might have been 2 summers ago, but it was down at City Dock.
Wow. Who's that woman behind the Foster grants?
All right, thank you for accommodating me. All right, so Jackie, if you, Mark, if you could unmute Jackie and welcome. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. That was a very interesting, kind of a unique meeting for us tonight. So I do appreciate it, but I thought it was really important to hear from you and build a relationship with your office. So.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, I think it's very important, especially in the new position that I have as the Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability, that I will be working with you, especially more and more. I have a presentation, and Mark can pull it up. I sent over to Hillary and Julian earlier today. There you go.
Wow, we're getting good, right?
Yeah, there you go. I don't trust myself to operate it, so they're helping me out. Okay, so, this is something that the intersection of climate change and historic preservation, which hasn't been given a lot of thought by many in this space, and especially within the city. I know we're doing some things that obviously have been brought to your attention and will be, as we go forward, especially the City Dock revitalization, Killman Garage, and some other projects. But
this is a PowerPoint presentation period.
I'm sorry, somebody say something? Okay. But just before I get into it, I just want to just talk about what a resilient city means. What does resilience and sustainability mean in the first place? And, I put a definition up here that resilient cities are cities that have the ability to absorb, recover, and prepare for future shocks, whether those are economic, environmental, social, institutional. And that's basically the definition of resilience put into a more workable layman's kind of form. And then a resilient city promotes sustainable development, well-being, and inclusive growth. So sustainability is about continuing services now and in the future, services and our way of life, our culture, and livability and quality of life for now and into the future. And resiliency is more about how you prepare and react to threats, whether they are natural or man-made. And I've put down below that some of the things that resilience and sustainability account for, and it's very broad, such as the protecting the economy, property, our shelter, our housing, public health and safety, improving water quality. Our emergency preparedness is a big part of it. Providing green spaces and connecting green spaces. And that's become very evident during the pandemic for people's both physical and mental health, is getting out into green spaces and having them available. Our transportation routes and transit and connectivity of those routes is very important and is impacted by climate change. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and something I'm working on, building EV infrastructure and electrifying the city's fleet, reducing our litter and protecting natural resources, and providing reliable, clean energy, quality of life, and equity throughout all of this. The services we provide, the quality of life we provide, everything that we're doing with the environment and resiliency must be equitable and available to all Annapolis residents throughout the city. Next slide, please. Mark. Okay, so I just want to back up a little bit too, and this is my new position. It's got a very long title, so I just call it DCM for RNS most of the time. And being true to my environmental background, it's alphabet soup when it comes to the environment, and this position is no different. We're part of the city manager's office. It's just me and one other person, the environmental programs coordinator for now. I want to say for now because it's a lot of work for two people. And it was elevated to the city manager's office due to the recognition that climate change is the driver behind what we're doing for resiliency and a lot of the work throughout the entire city. So I'm tasked with incorporating resilience and sustainability into all aspects of city services and practices and across all departments and offices. And in particular, Tim asked me to identify who I'm working with mostly, and it's throughout the whole city, but mostly planning and zoning, Department of Public Works, OEM, transportation, and rec and parks. Quite a bit with planning and zoning for erosion and sediment control, development projects, tree canopy and retention of trees in natural areas in development. Historic preservation is coming more and more into play all the time with some of the things that we want to and need to do to combat greenhouse gas emissions and other pollution and to be more resilient as a city and community. So my information, my contact information is right there at the bottom too for anyone who needs it.
And Jackie, so I don't mispronounce your name. Is it Guild or Guild?
It's Guild, yes.
Okay.
It looks just like Guild, and I respond to that. So. All right. So impacts of climate change. So our number one threat, and I know this is foremost in your thoughts when you look at all our lovely buildings down near the city dock and all the flooding that goes on, is number one threat is flooding. And we think about sea level rise probably the most when we talk about resiliency. And I just, you may be familiar with a lot of the data, I'm sure, because you are so concerned with preserving and protecting our historic buildings. But depending on the scenario you look at, and NOAA did a number of projections, the latest ones were from 2017, that we will experience between 4.3 feet and 9 feet of sea level rise by 2100. And that's pretty alarming, and it doesn't give us much time to react to it and to implement the practices we need, the projects we need in order to reduce that level of threat and to mitigate it and plan for it. So right now we're experiencing anywhere from 39 and more sunny day flooding and other flooding events downtown. It is projected that we will experience flooding downtown every other day by 2030, which is not very far away, and every day by 2045. And that's if we don't do anything, which we don't plan to do that, of course. Next slide. As an example of what can happen if we didn't do anything, this is a picture obviously of Hurricane Isabel, and that was a 6.4 foot storm surge. 60 of 140 properties flooded downtown. If this one's a little low on the screen, but if Isabel, an equivalent storm surge happened in 2050, again, without any mitigation measures in place, 95 to 118 of those 140 properties would flood. If it was 118, that's 84% of the properties downtown would flood. Again, that's under different NOAA scenarios. That's why it's a range between 95 and 118 properties. Next slide, please. Okay, so other threats besides sea level rise, well, things that can happen due to sea level rise and other factors, is the archaeological evidence that can be damaged due to changing soil conditions that we get with water intrusion. Damages to building from groundwater that's starting to rise, and saltwater intrusion that comes with it. Damage to the organic building materials from pest migration that goes along with changes in temperature and changing weather patterns. And those weather patterns can make these pests more resistant to our control measures and cause them to flourish. Streets and vegetation can be damaged from storms and flooding. This picture below is showing the trees there by City Dock, and that kind of water is not only, those kind of trees aren't their roots don't like to be wet. There are some plants that do like to be wet, not that wet all the time. And also they are not intended to be, they're not to have salt water, and that happens with flooding that we're getting, and it's happening more and more often. So that's, our street trees really are fighting for their lives on a daily basis. And then there's the social impacts from losing our cultural heritage when we lose some of our significant historical buildings and other resources. Next slide, please. Some of these options I know you're very familiar with. They were in the cultural hazards resources mitigation study that was done, but we can improve resilience on site. The other option is to relocate. Some resources are significant no matter where they're located. A building that is historically significant could be moved without really damaging too much its historical significance, if at all. But then there are others that are such as the Alex Haley Memorial. That memorial is significantly placed there because of that's where the slave ships came in and the slave auctions were held. If we had to move that memorial, that would not be as significant in a different location, obviously. So that's something to consider. And then there's the documenting historical significance and preparing for loss, abandon certain resources. And then we find other ways to incorporate the changing climate into the site's history. I know we've talked about raising buildings and providing flow through for flooding, flood surges. So different options. And I know that we have identified properties and identified some solutions, but we have not implemented many of those solutions yet. And we don't have the luxury of time here. We have to act now and very quickly. There's no time to waste. Perfect. We have to design based on the anticipated impacts over the lifetime of a structure. So with at least 4.3 feet of future sea level rise, we should really plan for more than that, because we most likely are going to get more than that over time. And so that if a project is designed for a 40-year period, we need to design based on the impacts we expect to incur over that 40-year period. We could incorporate scalable flood protection measures. So those would be flood protection measures that you can increase over time, such as a seawall. If you wanted to raise that, it may not have to be raised all at once. It's a very costly venture. We may be able to raise it a few feet at a time or deploy other techniques that you can scale up. There's some multifunctional design elements that are in the city dock plan, such as elevated walkways on the seawalls, green infrastructure. It not only looks good, but it also retains and absorbs and filters stormwater. And it provides, if you're providing trees, which are in the city dock plan, you are helping to reduce the urban heat island effect and providing respite from the hotter temperatures we're experiencing. We may need to have some zoning code revisions for location of buildings and the way that we build buildings to be more resilient to flooding and other climate change impacts. Public engagement education is a big part of resiliency planning. And there's some, I know that at all sites where we're digging in the city, we have an archaeological plan that needs to be, we're going to have more and more sites where climate change impacts are going to be impacting cultural resources, and we must make sure that we are documenting the archaeological evidence there and protecting it in some instances. And then I know that the National Park Service Department of Interior recognizes that its rules and guidance do not adequately reflect climate change and how quickly climate change impacts are occurring and affecting us. This group may have more information than I have at the moment about where they are with that process. But in just doing research in the last several months, I'm seeing more and more that that is an issue that is recognized by the National Park Service, and being flexible and incorporating climate change and resiliency considerations into cultural resource protection is much needed at this point. Because without it, some rigid rules may prevent some practices that could really help reduce the impacts on our resources down the line. Next slide, please. Okay, So what I'm trying to do, I put the statement up front, is to align the environmental and resiliency and land use and economic development with protecting the city's historical character and its other resources, while increasing these resources' resilience to natural and man-made stressors. And we have a number of studies we've done and others that are ongoing that we're building this layer of consideration in. The comprehensive plan is, I try to get a firm date from planning and zoning when we could expect it to be done, but I'm working closely with them on building the environmental considerations into that plan. It probably of a good working draft by this summer. And I'm working with Eric Lashinsky, our Chief of Comprehensive Planning, on the green part of that and the resiliency part of it. We have a draft resilience plan that we worked on mostly in 2019, the beginning of 2020, with staff and with the University of Maryland and Throw Environmental. It covers everything from transportation to historic resources to city dock and resilience hubs, emergency preparedness. It's comprehensive everything and everything resilience, but it was not completed. So I am working with planning and zoning on getting this done. I'm taking the lead on the project now to try to get it done in conjunction with the comp plan and have it as an addendum to the comp plan. The cultural resources hazard mitigation plan that was I've heard time to implement. I know that some work has been done there. Resources have been identified, priority resources and some options, but we're running out of time. As I said, we need to start implementing protections for our cultural resources. Other resiliency work, then some of it will affect downtown, is the transportation plans. We may have roads that we may no longer be able to use, have different evacuation routes. There may be some raising of roads and sidewalks. That is all in still in the infancy of planning with Department of Transportation. But then we also, related to transportation, we're electrifying the city's fleet. We have to provide infrastructure for that fleet. There's also a growing demand by the public for EV charging stations. And I'm right now working on that in other parts of the city. I know a presentation was made to this commission about a year and a half ago. COVID kind of slowed things down there. But as that is a process that I will have to work with you all on, I'm attacking the low-hanging fruit first, which is other places in the city where I don't have to get permissions from this commission, but I will be back on that issue. And then, so we'd like to get some downtown, and I know there's a lot to work with Roberta on that and what they can look like and where they can go in the whole process. I'm working with OEM on the disaster response recovery plan, adding some resilience hubs to that. We have a grant out right now to develop resilience hubs and to look at feasibility studies for them. And community rating system. This is something Timmy had brought up to me. The city had its community assistance visit from FEMA in 2019, and they identified a few items the city had to address before we could submit an application. We are looking to finish up that process and get our application in within the next couple of months to FEMA. And once our application is, they will do a formal review of the city's actions we've taken to prepare for flooding and prevent damage to properties. And then they will give us a rating. When we receive that rating, flood insurance discounts will be available to property owners in the city. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned that the National Park Service and the Department of Interior recognizes that we have to accommodate actions to mitigate and avoid climate change and the need to revise rules and provide guidance to planners to balance our historic and cultural goals with the reality that damage and loss will occur to historic structures from rising seas and extreme weather, and there are some actions we can take to prevent that, but they need to be compatible with the rules that allow what we can do, historic preservation rules, that is. And then the need to accommodate green infrastructure, electric vehicles, solar installations, and other carbon capture reduction and heat reduction measures to combat the effects of climate change. And these are, and some things like that would be like where we can plant trees. I know there's some issues about what the streetscape may have looked at it like at a certain period of time and where the trees were there. We ran into this when we did a concept for the greening in Main Street, which I'll touch again later. And then we were going to put in some rain gardens and other structures, expand the sidewalks, remove curbs. All of these were issues that Roberta flagged when we were looking at the concept design for the greening of Main Street. Okay, so some hard and soft solutions: shoreline protection, seawalls, revetments, living shorelines. I know that's a big point of contention right now with the St. Mary's living shoreline proposal, and wetland buffers, recreation of wetlands as buffers, flood protection. Some of them are permanent, such as dams and levees, berms, and then deployable. I talked about some deployable things and scalable procedures and projects we could use. Stackable flood walls or one, and they can be increased over time as sea level rises. But hopefully we can take some of these measures and reduce our carbon emissions. We can slow sea level rise. Stormwater management, which is a big part of the city dock revitalization and the whole city pumping system projects at City Dock. We have pumps. We're realigning our storm drains and stormwater system under the roads. Green infrastructure and trees will help with capturing and absorbing some of the stormwater. Transportation routes, as I mentioned before, raising roads and sidewalks, redirecting traffic during flood situations, or we may have to abandon some roads and just redesign them altogether. And then, as I mentioned before, what do we do with our building code to make our buildings more resilient and adaptable? There may be elevation changes, siting issues where we can and should allow buildings to be redeveloped or new development because they may end up in the water in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So is it worth doing it in the first place? And providing the infrastructure to support them. So land use planning comes into play, and overlying all of this are environmental policies. So Hillman Garage, City Dock, and Main Street. These are some of the resilience projects that involve resilience to a very large degree and are driven, their design is driven by climate change stressors. Hillman Garage is first, as you know. In addition to adding the parking at Hillman, it's designed to be a flexible space for future needs. So it may have some recreational aspects on the roof built in. We might have some solar built in. Their EV charging units will definitely be part of Hillman, and that's one area in downtown I can get them in without having to come before this commission. And in adding green infrastructure to the garage as well, to absorb stormwater and make it more aesthetically pleasing as well. City Dock, I mentioned the realigning the storm drain system, adding the deep well pump stations, the green vegetation, raising the seawalls, elevating the recreational space. The Burtis House and Harbor Master space are also going to be redesigned and be part of that. And we are looking at a resilience grant. We're not looking at, actually, we received it now. We're looking at RFPs from a grant for the Department of Defense to work with the county and the Naval Academy on resilience factors that can affect the military installations, preparedness, and their function, but also because of our proximity and actually contiguous location to the Naval Academy, how we will work together, because resiliency doesn't respect who owns what property. So we're looking at I think mostly we're focusing on transportation, but overall resiliency proposals and recommendations for the City Dock kind of area, but beyond that, up into the Broadneck area of the county and down Forest Drive in the city and into the county. So all of this is, we're kind of looking at a large area that the Naval Academy and the county and the city all share, and how we can be more resilient and what recommendations some of the firms that we're looking at have made. So there's about 8 firms that responded to our request for proposal, and we're looking at them right now. The rebricking of Main Street, I mentioned that will not happen until Hillman is rebuilt so that we don't lose parking. I think with COVID and the elimination of a lot of parking on Main Street, people are starting to realize now that it works. I mean, we like to get outside, and people are using the sidewalks and outside a lot more. And so that experiment the mayor did a few years ago with the bike lane may not have been the best idea, but the people were using the sidewalks and the benches and the cafe seating, and we're using it more now than ever. It actually works. And we took out a lot of parking to do that. And you can see there's been added to the streets, greenery and things in pots and things like that. And we had the idea we were going to put in more permanent greenery just for stormwater retention purposes, not just aesthetics. So when we had a concept design with grant money for the rebricking of Main Street, and where we would add in stormwater retention and other resiliency kind of measures. And so we still have that concept design. We will be, obviously, when we bring that back, we'll be working with this commission to make sure that everything we're doing meets with your approval and it incorporates adequate consideration to protect our cultural resources. And then mobility is the last one. I have is mobility down here. The mayor wants to promote as much as possible, as you know, walkability, biking, pedestrian access, even scooter sharing, bike sharing. And we have some of those facilities already, the bike sharing ones already downtown, but we're looking at adding other mobility types and bike sharing, maybe even car sharing down the road downtown. So those are maybe issues where they can be located for this commission. Other considerations for you, I mentioned some of these already with EV charging and green infrastructure, tree planting, the use of energy efficiency, incorporating more energy efficiency into everything the city does, such as solar, where we can have solar, microgrids. I mentioned that we put in a grant application for feasibility study for microgrids and resilience hubs. And a resilience hub is a place where people can come in an emergency, whether it's extreme hot or cold, or it's a storm, or just sea level rise, and people their homes are flooding. And it's a place where there's reliable energy is the big part of it. And that's why our energy companies get involved with us. So adding solar to, let's say, a church we're already using as an emergency center, but that church doesn't have a reliable energy source. So solar we would be adding solar capacity to that facility, and any other considerations that make it a true resilience hub. So this is, if we get the grant funding, we'll be doing a resiliency study. It's not just in disadvantaged and low income neighborhoods, because as we know, the climate change impacts are affecting everybody. So there may be a resilience hub in a building downtown somewhere, but that's all to come. If we get this grant, we'll be studying this. We're looking at litter reduction measures. We did a plastic-free Annapolis campaign last year, largely the hospitality sector, getting them to reduce their use of plastics and offering alternatives. And this year, we are receiving a grant from Department of Natural Resources for a cigarette butt campaign. It's an education campaign to inform residents and business owners and visitors that there's a lot of plastic in cigarette butts and it doesn't decompose readily. And it's the most prevalent form of litter found on shorelines, according to DNR's study they did last year. So we have a grant to do an education campaign with Annapolis Green. One thing that Annapolis Green wants to do, and this is something I'd have to confer with Roberto about, is to put up, there's containers that a company called TerraCycle puts up, and they're small containers that you can attach to a lamppost, and that's where you can put your cigarette butts. And then TerraCycle takes the contents and actually recycles the butts into other materials that are made of plastic. And there will be, Annapolis Green will also be handing out portable ashtrays, plastic portable ashtrays, and talking to people on the street and just doing a general education about it. We may have to put up the TerraCycle containers outside of the historic district, but that's something I need to talk to Roberta about more, because they would not be up for a long period of time. And I know that we can erect signs and do some other things for 30 days without formal commission approval. So Roberta, I'll be talking to you about this very soon. And then shoreline resilience and land conservation. That's something that we need to think about, because St. Mary's is one of those projects that, really brought the difficulties of some of these projects to the forefront, where it intersects with historic properties. I understand what they're trying to accomplish there. But, as you all wrestled with when they made their last presentation before you, there's some significant historical considerations they may just not be able to meet. And they may not be able to come up with a compromise solution that passes muster with this commission and meets the grant objectives that they have, because they have to meet whatever DNR set forth in their grant requirements. So those are, that's a difficult one. There may be, I'm hoping that we have other living shorelines that can go in the city and help us protect our shorelines and buffer wave action and avoid erosion that are outside the historic district. But hoping that they come up with a compromise on that one. And I know they're coming before you again, and I'm trying to guide them in the right direction. And also, I know DNR doesn't want to continue to give them money for the project if it's just not going to work on that property. So things like that, and green roofs are another one that I'm hoping we can get more green roofs downtown, and more solar. I know the community solar is becoming really big, and a lot of residents want solar. So hopefully some solar can go in the historic district as well. So I think that's all I have. I think that's the last slide I had. I wanted to just allow plenty of time for questions, and I'm hoping to work with you guys a lot more in the coming months to get some of these resilience projects going.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jackie.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate your time, especially this late in the evening. And yeah, I think my goal was to educate the commission as to what your role is and working across different departments. And it obviously cuts across almost in a fashion over every department. And you mentioned the key ones. The other thing, before I open it up for questions, I really want to remind commissioners who may not have read the hazard mitigation study from 2017 that it's sitting there. And I completely agree with Jackie that there are action items in there that we as a group, I believe, need to start sponsoring. And I'm not sure there's any low-hanging fruit, but there are some things that we can cooperate with and move forward. It was an incredibly exciting experience 3 or 4 years ago. And so that's one thing. The other is we're going to have an awful lot of stuff going on in the next 2 years about City Dock. And a lot of applications are going to come in front of us, and they are going to have resiliency aspects to them. And we need to think about how our role and some of our guidelines are reflected in those plans. So, so questions for Jackie from the commissioners? Thoughts? Well, we're all tired.
Hey, Jackie.
Yeah, Bill.
If I may.
Sure.
Jackie, the historic protection component of this for all the properties is going to be a significant issue, as you have stated down on that list. What, if anything, has been looked at to date on how compromises can be made, or has anything been even projected?
For the historic buildings?
For the historic buildings and working within the historic guidelines. Because these are federal guidelines.
Right. So to my knowledge, the city has not taken any steps further than the resource mitigation study, apart from identifying priority properties and developing some options. Right. The options are they're a big lift, and they're very serious. Do we actually want to abandon any of these properties? That's a really serious question. And then if for the ones we want to save, are we really looking at lifting them up or providing flow through for flooding? and that's very expensive. Many of them, and this is another wrinkle to it, are privately owned. So what are we expecting homeowners to do? So many places, I mean, homeowners, property owners, businesses, that many of them are commercial, especially that are in the path of storm surges and sea level rise. So what can they do, and what will the city help them at all? That's another big question, because the lift there is pretty expensive to save them.
I can chime in, Bill, and not much, to answer your question, not much has been done on this. And
Well,
it's kind of what I think we want to start getting involved in.
Well, what I'm looking for, I guess, is we here have done very little. There are other cities. There's Boston, there's New York, there's Charleston, there's Savannah. There's other cities that have to be looking at this.
Definitely.
And I'm sure they have historic areas that they have to deal with as well. So.
Yeah, during the study 3 years ago, we had several speakers, especially the Netherlands is a perfect example. Tons of examples of things that we just need to bring them back to the forefront, I think, to take the next step and make sure it informs.
And cities like Charleston are a perfect example. It's another city on the water, historic city on the water. So part of my work is to look at what these other cities are doing, and then to work with you to see what we can do to protect our resources.
Yeah.
Because we're not the first one who's done it. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, but we haven't done anything. And to answer your question, we haven't done anything besides we did this wonderful study. We haven't acted on it yet.
Yeah.
Well, Jackie, you've been here, what, all of a month maybe? Why isn't this done by now?
Yeah, so I've been with the city since 2018, but I've been in this position. I guess it was approved in late November. Yeah.
You've had
4 months. A bit of history.
Why haven't I done it?
The cultural resources study was started in planning and zoning, and it ended up on your website.
Oh, did it? I didn't even know
right.
that.
It was started over with planning and zoning, but Pete Gutwald, the predecessor, said, "Oh, let's put it over there," it's because the resources are not available necessarily in planning and zoning. So we need to, I think, campaign a little bit to get you resources.
Yeah, it sounds like if we don't get planning on this, literally, and move forward, we might as well start getting some gondolas out and call us, Venice East.
Yeah. So on your radar should be the Burtis House, which is a perfect, all of our radar. Jackie, I know it's on your radar, and Roberta too. It's a perfect example. The plans are out there already. It is going to be raised up. It's really hilarious to me that raise and raised are two different words, but meaning the opposite. We're not going to raise the house. We're going to actually raise it up. And that is a new treatment that's approved by the National Park Service and the Maryland Historic Trust. That 5 years ago, they said, no, you can't do that. Now, an example. So the Burtis House is the first example we're going to have as a commission to review in a few months, really. So that's important. And what do you do with all those other private properties? That happens to be will be a city property, easier to do.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's one of their private properties. Makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
And does this commission, have you guys worked with any property owners or had input from them on private property?
Not, Roberta can probably address that, but not necessarily on the resilience side. We're down in the, kind of the approval of exterior changes. The Sands house is an example of one house that we have talked about. Drainage isn't flooding so much as just stormwater drainage. And Roberta worked very, very hard with them to come up with a good solution. So that's one example.
Okay.
Interesting, one other thing that we will see, the Main Street rebricking has been on our radar for years.
Right.
We're watching that. And the idea of raising sidewalks is going to be a very interesting idea. But all again, the city dock plan is going to bring this all to the forefront for us to review.
Right.
You also mentioned, utilities and solar. And I'm curious if you how successful you might have been working with BG&E to get them to partner with us. We have an issue in general with them coming to us before they do things. Are you forming a partnership there that we can possibly leverage?
I'm working with them mostly. I mean, I've been involved in all the connected communities discussions. I know Roberta's been on many of them. But I'm working with them mostly on the EV infrastructure. BG&E has a program for installation of infrastructure. Obviously, they want the usage from them, but they will install, maintain, and take out, if necessary, the EV chargers. So we have them, one went in at the rec center. We have them going in at Gott's Garage and at the visitor center, at Park Place there, and looking at other locations throughout the city. I know the mayor very much wants EV chargers downtown, near the Market House and in other areas downtown for visitors, preferably fast chargers. The location, the look, how they fit in with the streetscape are all issues that will have to be addressed by this commission if we're going to allow them.
That's probably another example of other cities have confronted this, and historic cities. So we might want to do some research on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I need to do some more research on that, what other cities have done, obviously, and see how we can incorporate those into Annapolis.
Yeah.
Because we want to move, we're electrifying the city fleet. The chargers for the city fleet will probably be over at Gott's while Hillman is being addressed, and then back at Hillman, and then at other locations, Public Works and facility and some other locations.
Okay. All right. Other comments, thoughts? All right.
Okay. I look forward to working with you guys more.
I look forward to it, and we'll pick up, especially regarding, I think, the main action item for me to put on us is to take that cultural resource study from 2017 and use that as a working document between us.
Yeah, and Sean Wampler, just reached out to me about Weather It Together, about the website, and asking if we should update that. I think we should update that. And not only with what your plans are, but also some of the information that went into that is there's new information that needs to go into it.
Right. Well, I think we're interested. I speak for all of us. We're interested, and Bobby and I have talked a little bit about it, and maybe we have some time to help a little bit.
Okay,
right,
great.
Bobby?
Thank you.
I'm volunteering, Bobby and I.
Thanks, Bobby.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Jackie.
You're welcome. Call me anytime. Email me.
All right.
Glad to hear from you guys.
All right.
Okay,
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. One more short thing. We're required by code to have an annual election every year. We're supposed to do it in the first meeting of the year. It is, unless I hear any other nominations, would anyone like to be chairman? Or vice chair?
I nominate Tim Leahy.
Right, what we need to do is, I need to take a nomination for, I am willing to serve. I just need to take a nomination, and then we vote, and then we take a nomination for vice chair for Bobby. So I'll take a nomination for chairman.
I nominate Tim Leahy for chair.
I second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I can't vote. All right, and I'll take a nomination for vice chair.
Can't nominate myself.
I nominate Bobby Collins.
Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. All right, there we go. I think we accomplished that.
I'd like a pay raise, though.
Okay.
We'll give you double the money.
I recommend a tenfold increase.
There we go. There we go. We used to be able to at least go out and have a dinner together every once in a while, but maybe in the near future we'll do that.
We could get taken.
Right? We could absolutely. I'll ship Chick-fil-A to everybody in the meeting for the next time. Okay. Any other business
Hold on 1 minute, Jay, please.
we need to raise? Any administrative business? So our meeting, on the administrative meeting, we're going to have two items. One is the, we'll join the historic, or the planning commission will join us, and we'll see the presentation from City Dock. So that's going to kick it off.
Right back.
We already heard that at the beginning. So look forward to that. I think we have another pre-app as well. Can't remember what it was. But so we will have an admin meeting this month.
Okay.
Thank you all for tonight meeting. It was it was like a perfect storm of 3 applications, all dealing with new issues that we're all learning about. So I appreciate your input. All right, I'll take if there's no other business, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So move. Second.
All in favor?